Hey everyone, the following is a conversation with Brandon Evans from the organization Fire to Light, and I'll go into his introduction once you start the episode. But I wanted to thank you for listening. We tried to highlight guests that can champion wellness and mental wellness in the U.S. Fire Service, and Brandon's doing some pretty cool stuff. There's a lot that people try to shoot for when they're thinking about their dreams and their goals, and very few of us go all in on stuff. And other than his mental health mission that he's on, I think also just the fact that this guy gave up everything to chase down this mission that he's on, and it's impressive, because few of us would drop everything, sell our house, leave our country, and go all in on something like this. So I think you'll really enjoy this one. He is a career firefighter from Canada who ended up moving to Costa Rica and started Fire to Light. So enjoy this episode of the Rescue One podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Rescue One podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This episode I'm really excited about. We have Brandon Evans from Fire to Light, and I wanted to bring him on to talk about his mission. I also wanted to mention some of the really exciting things he has going on. It's unique, and the mission that he has and the research that he's doing, I think, is really important. I also wanted to bring him on to talk as a former firefighter about some of the things that we are challenged by, and that he has gone through, and has centered his mission around. And I think it's really important to hear some people that have gone through it and have gotten through it, and how he's trying to help. So, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on, and welcome to the Rescue One podcast.
Awesome, John. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm excited to chat today.
Me too. So, tell me a little bit about where you got started, how you got in the fire service, and when that kind of went over to where you are now.
Yeah, so I spent 11 years as a professional firefighter for a large urban fire department up in Canada. Spent a couple years as a volunteer, did a season doing wildfire. I was inspired as a kid by one of my best friend's dads. And then my wife and I, we got together, started to know each other in high school, and her father was a platoon chief with our local fire department. And those two individuals, so my father-in-law and my best friend's dad, really inspired me as a kid. My family was in the insurance world, and I just couldn't see myself going in to do insurance. I didn't like the paperwork. I liked using my hands. And initially it was just like a thrilling job. But when I really kind of dove into it, they were both really happy people. They both loved what they did. They spoke about how much they loved their job. And so it really started to get the wheels spinning of like, it's interesting. Like, there weren't a lot of adults in my life, especially as a teenager, who openly talked about how much they loved their job, let alone liked their job. And so the fact that there was that sense of thrill excited me, and the people that I knew were speaking really highly of it. So it kind of intrigued me to dive into the fire service.
That's great. And in Canada, similar to US, you basically, most places anyway, you apply, they bring you through the fire academy. You work at that department. You don't have to go and do everything separate.
Yeah, I mean, at that time when I got hired, there still is, but there was a lot of competition. So there was a lot of things we had to do to make your resume look good. We had to get our NFPA 1001, 1002. Needed hazmat certs to even apply. Needed our a DZ license, air brake license, to apply to most fire departments. And then we have to wait until departments are holding recruitments, typically once a year. Sometimes there's bigger gaps depending on the department, the size, all those things. And so it's not uncommon in Canada for it to take 3, 5, 7+ years to get hired in a department. A lot of that is depending on like how far are you willing to travel and go to get hired. So for an example, when I got hired, there was 5 of us in our class, and I think there was like maybe 3,000 people applied for those jobs.
Ooh, yeah, that's wild. What year was that?
That was 2012.
Okay. So still in the recession a little bit, but starting to kind of move out of it. Yeah, gotcha. With that, do you guys have to be EMTs or paramedics?
No,
Okay,
no.
so you just do your fire stuff. It's a lot of fire service to get hired. That's not that common, I don't think. But I see, if for those of you that are just listening and not watching, Brandon has this really beautiful background back there. Where in the world are you right now?
So I currently reside in Costa Rica, in the southern zone of Costa Rica.
And how did that happen? I mean, Canada to Costa Rica. That's a pretty jump. I'm sure everyone that you work with is jealous. But like, where did this leap happen? I mean, why did that place get chosen?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a short short answer, but
That's
we
okay. We got time.
my so why how am I in Costa Rica as a firefighter? How did this happen? Why Costa Rica? So roughly 2 years ago, I approached my chief and my deputy chief at the time. I had this idea to create a program for firefighters, a mental fitness program. So we had a lot of discussion around that, what that looks like, and I'd asked for an unpaid leave of absence to really focus on building this program and doing some research in relation to the program. My chiefs at the time were very supportive of the health of firefighters, and so they granted me the leave. Once the leave was granted, I kind of looked at my wife and I said, "Hey, do you always want to do that thing that we have always talked about?" So in our younger years, before I became a firefighter, my early 20s, I backpacked around the world, circumnavigated the world, spent time in Asia and India, the Middle East, all over the place, Australia, New Zealand. And so we've always been inclined to travel. We always wanted to spend some time in a different country with our children, just to kind of gift them that experience of travel, experience of different cultures. And so for Costa Rica, for us, we'd been there once or twice for a wedding and a vacation. And we said, hey, let's just start there and see how it goes. That's really how it happened. It was close enough to Canada that it wasn't the complete other side of the world. So to come back to visit family, to have our parents come visit us, that kind of thing, it kind of seemed like a close enough location. And we just started there. In terms of countries in the Central Americas, it's a good country to live. Things are a bit easier. The ways that laws are structured, rules, that kind of stuff, it kind of just makes it easy to live. There's not a lot of fear that you might have in some other places. And so yeah, we just kind of took a stab in the dark and we came down here and we're still here.
That's awesome. And I think there are few people in the fire service that I don't want to get too much into that because I'd like to talk about your mission first, but we have this self-limiting belief that we can't do anything else, that the fire service is kind of it. And man, that has to create a whole bunch of other baggage for us, when it comes to falling into a bad way. If you are having a hard time on the job, or if you're having financial trouble at home or something like that, or God forbid you get hurt and you think you can't do the job, in the back of your head, you're like, this is all I know and this is all I can do, because fire skills aren't really transferable to the corporate world, for the most part. And it's really hard to like keep yourself from going down a dark path, if you end up thinking you're going to lose this and this is all you can do. So I commend you for, taking a leap and doing something, but rewinding to what you said when you had said that you wanted a paid leave, or you wanted a leave of absence. It was unpaid, right? Like they said you can go. Unpaid. We ain't paying you.
Correct.
So
correct.
Yeah, ballsy. That's awesome. But when you started down that journey, what were you thinking? Like, did you think, okay, I'm going to do this for a short amount of time, come back? Were you thinking, I'm going to use the fire department maybe as a safety net? Or were you like, I'm going all in on this? kind of your mind space at that time? Like, how did you execute on that?
Yeah, it was all of those things, to be quite honest with you. Excuse me. It wasn't a simple decision, and there was a lot of factors leading up to that moment. And so, in the middle of COVID, sorry, let me rewind a little bit more just to give you some deeper context, because this wasn't just a let's go do this, this will be fun kind of decision, right? It's not that simple. Prior to COVID, 18 months before COVID happened, my wife and I opened a gym. So we got in, my part-time job as a firefighter was running a CrossFit gym with my wife. We'd ended up losing that business during COVID. So we were only open for 18 months. January 2020, we just started making a little bit of money. And then March 2020, COVID strikes. Where we lived in Canada, my gym was closed for almost 2 years. It was very difficult to run a business, make any money. I made the decision to close it. Financially, on paper, it was just like, it was an easy decision. The gym was completely decimated financially. It cost us a lot. It cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. But going through that entire process, smack in the middle of it, we responded to a call in December 2020 at the fire hall. It was a homicide. And it really shook me. There was a lot of pressure from COVID itself. There was pressure, financial pressure at home. We were losing money on a daily basis. We were about to go into another lockdown. That means that gym members are canceling their memberships more and more and more. And I was like stressed to the max. I'd spent 2+ years trying to build this business, making this massive financial decision to get into leasing a huge commercial space, spending all this money on the equipment. And then the gym's closed, and it kind of stripped away the control that I had. So I spent my time during COVID trying to help everybody else, trying to keep everyone else's spirits up. All kinds of social media initiatives and, showing up on Zoom to help our members and trying to be the positive one. And then this scene happened, and it really brought up all this other trauma in my life from the decade of firefighting that I never really, not really dealt with before, and so that took me into a dark place. I started this journey of healing, of therapy, going back into meditation, breath work, all kinds of different modalities, working with psilocybin, all kinds of different things. And there was a progression, and I realized that I found I discovered that I was better afterwards than I was before it all happened. All those things kind of put me in a position to be like, wow, maybe I don't even want the gym anymore. Maybe it's not serving me, or maybe it's served me enough to get me to this place. And so I made this massive decision to close the gym. I backed out on my lease. I still had almost 2 years on a lease. So there was this huge fear, there still is, that I may be getting sued. I don't know, but we figured let's just take this step because I know it needed to happen. And that was a very challenging thing. It was very freeing also. It was the first time in my life that I felt I'd fully surrendered to something. I kind of knew I needed to close it, even though my ego didn't want me to close the gym. And so there was a lot of really beautiful things that happened within the fire hall throughout that process. The support that I got from my crew, they were like, oh my God, how are you going through this right now with the gym? It's constantly open, constantly closed, back and forth, all this stuff. And the fitness industry got hammered probably more than almost any other industry, especially where we were. And so the camaraderie on our crew really kind of bonded together. There was a lot of challenging things that were happening on our crew, specifically around COVID, vaccines, those types of things. But we didn't let us pull it down. We actually tried to work through it together as a crew. So I made the decision. I closed the gym. And then for the first time really in my adult life, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not studying to become a firefighter. I'm not working through the first 3 years of being a rookie in our classifications. I'm not trying to start a gym and spending all this time in an entrepreneurial space, discovering what that is and what that looks like. And I just kind of did nothing. And it was a very challenging thing because I'm so used to doing all kinds of stuff. And this idea surfaced. I looked at what I had done over the last year to work through those challenging times in my life. So we came home. I'm just going to share a bit of the story. I came home from that house fire. It was a homicide. I was covered in somebody else's skin. My partner and myself were part of a team that extracted this woman from a house fire. She'd been burned and beaten to death. So it was a horrible scene. We saw past her family on the front lawn. We knew it was a homicide while we were there, so it was really messed up. After a couple of days of being home, another closure, a lockdown was coming into play. So my stress immediately elevates. I'm not sharing these things with my family. My kids are 4 and 6 years old at the time. My son bursts into my office after I'm like hanging up the phone after my best friend just canceled his gym membership for his entire family. And I just fucking lost it on my kid, yelling, screaming at him, pushed him out of the office, swearing at him, right? Get the fuck out of my office. What the fuck is wrong with you? My son was 4 years old. And I just burst into tears like, what the hell am I doing? My wife looked at me and she's like, you need help. And it was a blow to my ego, man. You know, I'd spent the last 6 or 8 months trying to just juggle everything, trying to control all these things that I couldn't control. And so for me, it was about like getting back on the train of practicing regular meditation within that. So we have like the way our shift works is each month we have a 7-day stretch off from the fire hall. So the fire happened on a Thursday. We have 7 days off after that. This outburst happens on the weekend. By Tuesday, Wednesday of that next week, I've scheduled a breathwork call. I've scheduled an NLP session, so neuro-linguistic programming. And these things kind of start snowballing this healing journey for me of taking this real deep dive into this crazy depressive state that I was in my life. And this was happening before that scene even took place. That was just kind of like the cherry on top of the cake, if you will. And so we moved, to answer your question, we moved through a lot, my wife and I, through starting a business, through having that business closed, through trauma at the fire hall that I didn't even realize we were moving through together as a family, whatever that looked like. And so when this idea came up to build this program to try to fill a gap between where firefighters currently are and the services that most departments have for them, how can we help firefighters put their hands up for help sooner? So we're not like, for me, it was like 4 days after this incident that I turned around and started to get help. I know a lot of other people that it might have been 4 or 5 years or even longer than that, or some who are still suffering in silence. And so we eventually closed the gym. It was a crazy difficult decision because I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay back $400,000 that I don't have to pay back, but I got to figure this out one way or another. And so I dove into what I'm doing now, went to my chiefs, said, hey, I want to build this thing. And I know if I can, to do this properly, that I'm going to need time. Will you give me the time off to go and do this? I didn't really know how I was going to fund it. They said yes. I was either going to put a lien on my house or sell it. And so the housing market where we lived was like going through the roof. It was skyrocketing through the roof. And so, again, a lot of conversation, another difficult decision. My wife and I said, let's just sell the house. Neither of us wanted to rent it or be bothered renting it. So we sold our house. That was able to help us financially to get us through that year and try to build this new organization that I'm building. My wife is doing some stuff on her own as well. And so, yeah, like they weren't easy decisions. One thing led to the next, but, you know, making the decision to go and get help was really difficult. Making the decision to close the gym was crazy difficult. Making the decision to ask for an unpaid leave of absence wasn't easy. However, they all led to the other decision, and they all made those decisions a little bit easier. So it was like practicing those reps, getting the reps in of like making tough decisions, knowing that like once it's made, it's a huge relief, a huge weight becomes lifted off your shoulders. And that gives space for us to move into the things that we're working on. So not easy decisions, but that's kind of how we got to where we are, to say yes to moving to Costa Rica. And then in October of 2023, we're in 2024 now, my leave of absence was up. And I made the decision to retire from the fire hall. The lifestyle that my children have here in Costa Rica, the way that they have grown and started to become confident in themselves has been incredible. It's been incredible to watch. And so I just couldn't see myself taking that opportunity away from my kids. So that was the main component of me retiring from the service. This is a job that I love. If this is the first job that I would go back to if I had to, for whatever reason. However, as I dive into this work that I'm doing to work with firefighters, I really feel that my reach in terms of, helping or potentially helping firefighters is going to be far greater from this place where I am with the research we're doing and the work that we're doing than it would be sitting in the back of a fire truck. Not that I can't lead, I can't do those things from the back of the truck. That's amazing. This is just a decision that worked the best for me and my family in this moment. It was an extremely, extremely difficult decision to make to leave the fire service physically as a firefighter. However, it's one that we're happy with, and this work that I'm doing right now, it really lights me up.
I think it's hard for someone who's still in the fire service to put themselves in your position. So just to linger on that decision again for a little bit, what was the moment? I mean, I know obviously the trauma of that call, and thank you for sharing all that. But I know I'm sure that was a pretty big factor. Was that the straw that broke the camel's back, or was there something where, what was the moment where you were like, I'm doing this?
Are you talking about
leaving,
retiring?
Yeah.
So I went into probably for at least 3 or 4 years before I went on my leave of absence. I kind of just knew, like in the back of my head, like I'm probably not going to retire from the fire service at 60 years old. It's probably not going to be for me. I didn't know what that meant, but I was just, my wheels are always spinning. I'm always looking for different things. And I like things that are new and fresh because they're really exciting. And so I went into that year of leave with a complete open mind, just like, I'm going to take this one day at a time. I'm not going to make any decision now whether I am or I am not returning to work. I'm going to play this card like I have it here. So I'll take the leave of absence. We'll see what happens with it. If I don't go back, I don't go back. If I do, then I do. But I waited until the very last minute to make that decision. It was a tough one, man. It was a tough one. I talked to all the guys on my crew. I say guys because they're all men on my crew. So I talked to all of them. These are brothers that I've worked with, for the last 6 years. I think we've all, especially the core group of us, have been together. We're a really tight-knit crew. We are that family, right? I consider all of them my brothers. And so it was a really, really challenging decision to make, to leave such a incredible place and such an incredible crew. But my kids came first. I put my children first, and that was the biggest factor. If my kids were hating it here, I'd be riding a fire truck right now. Guaranteed. Like that, 100%.
Gotcha.
100%. And so we made a lot of decisions for ourselves, my wife and I, and we've also made a lot of decisions for our family. And so we had experience over the last couple of years making really hard decisions, making big, difficult, challenging decisions around our family, around our home, around money, around business. And so this was it just became another decision, you know. My heart was attached to my first business. It was like my little baby that I grew, and then I had to let it go. My heart was attached to my home. We bought it. I completely gutted it myself. You know, I was that firefighter. I was a contractor before I was a firefighter. I gutted that house. I redid the whole thing ourselves. My blood, sweat, and tears reside in that home. And so that was a tough thing to sell. It was a tough thing to get rid of, but we made the decision to do it. So it was really challenging. You know, I spoke with my deputy chief, and he gave me some advice. Not to pump my own tire, but he said, Brandon, I'm going to give you the same advice that one of my chiefs gave to me. He's like, my chiefs approached me to become a chief. He's like, I didn't want to be a chief. He goes, you're asking me to go from a group of individuals, right, from the union, most of which I like, to a smaller group of people of administration, most of who I don't really like. And his chief said, you're not wrong. He said, however, you know, the ability that you have to make change is going to be far greater in that position than it will riding in the front of the truck. This does not mean that change can't happen from the front of the truck. You know, I never really desired to be a captain. I really enjoyed being one of those more senior firefighters on the back of the fire truck. You know, a younger department growing up, learning from the other firefighters who were sitting on the back with me. And so I just kind of took that as a kind of like a cherry on the top to be like, all right, I know my heart is in this place. I am very passionate about health, about how can I improve my own life, the life of my family, and the life of those around me. You know, I enjoy talking, I enjoy storytelling, I enjoy sharing whatever knowledge that I have, and I enjoy learning. And so I really got lit up these last 2 years doing the work that I'm doing, creating this program, talking to all of these incredible people around the world, learning from them, doing this research on mental health. And so those things, the passion that I have because I am doing something, made it a little bit easier to make that final call of retirement from the fire hall. It wasn't easy. There was just, you know, all the stars kind of lined up for me. The timing popped up, and I was just kind of like, oh, you know, it wasn't a 5-year plan for me. I'm going to retire in 5 years because all the money means this, that, and the other. I didn't even look at the finances. I just looked at, where am I at with my life? Where are my kids at? What lights me up the most right now? And for me, it was this work that I'm doing. And so that's the decision that I went with.
Having something that can light you up like that, I think, is rare. And, you know, even in the fire service, after a certain amount of time, I remember when I first got hired, I started as a cadet. So I was, you know, 14, 15, riding on fire trucks.
Okay.
And then anytime the tones went off, I was excited. It could have been, you know, trip and fall. It was just cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, the novelty wears off. And then the novelty really wears off after midnight, you know, on calls. And then, you know, at some point, you're just like, okay, well, I only want to go to fires and extrications and like true emergencies. And then at some point, you're like, you know, even these get routine until something really, really crazy happens. It's like a dopamine burnout, you know? And
yep.
I think gratitude is probably the most important thing for me to keep that that like burnout from happening, because I got to remind myself how great it is to be able to do this. But so let's dive into that mission. You're uprooting yourself from Canada, coming down to Costa Rica. You've sold your house. I think it's safe to say you're all in at this point.
I'm all in, bro. I'm all in.
You're changing your entire life and your family's life to finance this. I think it's pretty awesome that it worked out, that your kids enjoy it down there. Maybe some people would call it fate. Sure. That it's because if it sucked for your kids, it sounds like this wasn't gonna be very good. But the fact that it did and it worked with your family, you're now in this position where you are fully dedicated to this. So tell me about Fire to Light, what you guys do in a nutshell. What kind of is the core thesis here?
Yeah. So what do we do? Our mission is to reduce firefighter PTSD and firefighter suicide. I know that, you know, that probably is never going to go down to zero. However, I believe there's a lot of preventative things we can do that we may or may not be doing, depending on the individual or the department, to help steer us away from those things, or at least reduce and minimize the amount of time that we may be off for a PTSD leave. So we are a research and development organization solely focused on the health of firefighters. And we have conducted international research on the current state of mental health within the fire service. So that showed us a lot. We interviewed over 100 chiefs and leaders from 5 different continents who represent more than 1.3 million firefighters. So this information becomes part of the foundation of what we do and how we can build into programming. And so we develop education through mental fitness programs for firefighters. The whole idea here is to prepare firefighters for the psychological side of our job.
I think, because I've, on your website, you talk about mental health through mental fitness. And I love that you guys have this mission of reducing it. I think, I love when I hear people say that they're trying to bring down that number, and, without jumping into all the causes behind PTSD and PTS. When you had your mental health crisis, that was due to you not having that mental fitness, correct?
Yeah, I had put most of my self-help tools, my mental fitness tools, off to the side, trying to scramble around to fix all the things in my life. And there was like there was a piece, right? There was this depth that I was suppressing emotionally that I wasn't allowing out, as I was trying to stand on a pedestal as the owner of this gym to try to help everybody, all my members and our audience through COVID. And I had been more or less ignoring myself. Right. I've been ignoring those pieces of me that needed my attention. My nervous system was completely out of whack. Right. The shift work doesn't help. The trauma doesn't help. The stress obviously doesn't help. And I wasn't using my tools. I wasn't using my breathing. I wasn't using my meditation. I was using my fitness at the time. It was primarily as a external way to try to de-stress, to not think about things, which is great. That was a bonus. But there was a lot of other things that I wasn't doing. And so I'd been practicing a lot of different modalities around like meditation, breath work, things to do with my health for the last 12 or 15 years. And when COVID struck, those things kind of went on hold. And I just kind of dove into ego mode. How can I fix everything?
Yeah, I can't even try to think of how many people do that. And I love the fitness side of it. I think the physical fitness side of it. I think that's such a healthy coping mechanism, right?
Totally.
I mean, it is a coping mechanism, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And just the level of, I guess, cortisol reduction and just keeping your happy hormones in balance, that stuff is so good. But I worry about people that think that's all they need to do, and they don't address anything else. I've said it ad nauseum: sleep, not correcting your sleep stuff, not paying attention to your lack of de-stress, not talking to your family, not saying, hey, this is going on, talking to a peer support, whatever. So with Fire to Light, you are trying to make that door a little more accessible and giving people the tools that they should have, that you wish you would have. And one thing that, like going through your website, I thought was pretty wild was the scope of this kind of study and the research that you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about that? It's called the Heroes Are Also Human study. Is that correct?
Yeah, we titled it Heroes Are Also Human. Heroes are also human. I needed to know more than what I knew. I knew what my experience was like. I knew what my environment within my own fire station and my own fire department was like. So I had an idea. You know, we're in this global mental health crisis, especially coming out of COVID, right? And so, from my viewpoint, anyways, and so I needed to know more. And so I started a research study. I do not have a background in academia. I didn't go to university. I was straight into fire right out of high school. And so I didn't really know what what that meant. I consulted with a psychologist. We came up with a list of questions in this space that we felt would be safe and still give us accurate information, both quantitative and qualitative. And I thought I would get, if I was lucky, maybe about 20 chiefs that I'd be able to interview. That should give me sufficient enough data to write a report. And the thing just snowballed. I spoke with leaders all over the world. I spoke with some of the largest fire departments in the world. I spoke with Tokyo Fire, who's the largest fire department in the world. I spoke with United States Fire Administrator, Dr. Lori Moore Merrill. So you can't literally get any higher in the United States when it comes to leaders in the fire service. So it showed me that this is a hot topic, that there is a lot of effort and energy going into trying to figure out the mental health side of our job within the fire service. There's a lot of passionate people about it. There's a lot of us who are trying to scramble to figure out what this actually means. We know that our suicide rates are almost double that of the general population. We know those numbers aren't declining. We know that our rates of PTSD are increasing. We know that in the general population, suicide rates, specifically with men, also with teens between 13 and 17, are on the rise. These are very concerning statistics, right? In general and within our industry as well. So how do we move forward from this? So one of the things Dr. Lori said to me, she's like, we're stuck in awareness. So if we use firefighter terminology, how do we move into the operational and technical side of our health, right? And I say health in general, not just physical, not just nutritional, not just spiritual, emotional, or psychological, but of our health. And so there's a lot of incredible things we've been doing, and we are really in the fire service standing on the shoulders of all these giants who have come before us. There's been so much work and effort that's got us to where we are, and a lot of us have a long way to go. And when I say us, I mean fire departments, right? So one of the things we touch on in our report, we looked at stigma. We looked at the demographics of who we interviewed. So over 90% of the individuals we interviewed were male. This statistic is congruent with the fire service. Over 90% of firefighters are male. Those numbers differentiate a little bit, obviously, from place to place, country to country, from volunteer to professionalism or professional or career firefighter. So those numbers are primarily based around career firefighting. And something that came up in conversation more than one occasion with these chiefs that I interviewed. So we asked them a question in relation to their experience with PTSD and firefighter suicide. And through those conversations, more than one chief had mentioned never having seen their fathers cry. So this got us thinking, how have men, right, and male firefighters, how have we been shown how to express our emotions in relation to the work that we do? Or how haven't we been shown how to express our emotions in relation to the work that we do? This isn't to exclude females in any capacity at all. We just looked at the numbers. We looked at who we were interviewing, the representation of who those are. And what does this mean? We know we have a whole bunch of alpha males who are in the workplace. There's nothing wrong with that. But how have we actually been shown to deal with this stuff, right? And so it's an interesting perspective. We dive into it a bit deeper in the report, obviously. But I think there's no fault of where we're at. with mental health. I think we are learning more and more about it every single day. I actually think we're in a really positive space in society in order to improve in life, in order to learn about things and discover things. Every inventor goes through copious amounts of failure, right? It's our best form of education. And this isn't about failure. This is about, if we want to discover ourselves, if we want to discover our minds, our emotions, our feelings, we got to dive in. We got to dive in. We know substance abuse is probably a much bigger issue than we actually think it is within the fire service itself, right? It's a coping mechanism that we've used for years and years and years. I travel around and go to firefighter conferences. There's nothing wrong with having a drink by any stretch of the imagination. And it's also something that we promote. It's something we've always learned to go to from those who have come before us, or at least some of them, as a mechanism to cope with the shit that we have to deal with, right? There's a side of our job that is absolutely incredible. And there's another dark side that really sucks. It's really, really sucks. And if we haven't been shown how to tap into that dark side, to find some beauty in it, to be able to live with it in a very healthy and safe capacity, then unfortunately, we watch our brothers and sisters go down a really dark path. And I really and honestly believe that it happens to all of us, just in a different way, a different shape, a different form, a different capacity. All of us may not experience PTSD. All of us may never, not everyone is going to put a gun to their head, but that happens, and it happens a lot. And so how can we help with that? What are we doing to help prepare for that dark side of the job that we don't talk about that much? One thing we do is we share those war stories, if we will. We share our stories. Oh, I went to this call, it was really bad. Yeah, I went to that call, it was really bad. And those things were really messed up. We like to make those comparisons. And we're starting a conversation now that never used to happen, to say, yeah, and then I went to my therapist afterwards, and she really helped me move through it. And these are the things that I discovered about myself. This is how I learned that 7-year-old Brandon was actually showing up in 35-year-old Brandon, who was really scared of all these things that happened. These are conversations that we're just scratching the surface level of, that I think are really, really powerful in keeping firefighters alive, healthy, and safe.
Yeah. What a wild ride. I mean, from where you kind of started, just like, hey, I think I'm going to get into the fire service, to kind of uncovering some of the stuff that is what we do have as a mental health problem, all the way into trying to get to the root cause of it. If I could underline one thing for this entire show right now, it would be what you said. We're stuck in awareness. I have asked this question to every single guest I've had to come on about mental health. I'm like, have we come into agreement that we have identified there is a problem? And everyone's like, yes. I'm like,
yes.
What are we doing? I love talking about this. I want to bring attention to it. But I think you're living under a rock if you think that there isn't a mental health problem. Everybody knows it. So
okay, let me give you a statistic that goes along with what you're talking about. Okay, so we looked at how do we train in mental health for firefighters. What are departments doing to offer training? So a question comes up: what do you consider training? This is a valid question, right? However, we looked at things that we could kind of measure, and so we looked at hands-on, more or less classroom setting programs that departments were offering for their firefighters. These are things like mental health first aiders, TRIM, resilient minds, things of this nature, right? These typically happen between a 4 to 8 hour session within a classroom. Most effective departments train on a monthly basis. The second most effective train annually, and the third most effective train 1 to 2 times in a firefighter's career, so over a 25-year span. Only 2% of departments we interviewed are training on a monthly basis in mental health. Only 7% are training on an annual basis, and over 86% are training only 1 to 2 times in mental health through the duration of a firefighter's career. There was about 4% that we just didn't have sufficient enough data. So we looked at those numbers. Now, this doesn't include conversations that happen around the hall. It doesn't include emails that go out. It doesn't include signage that we put up around the hall. So there are some things that become very challenging to track because each department does things very differently. However, this is the general consensus. This is more or less, and now I'm going back and consulting with these chiefs, presenting this research to them to share the findings with them. And some departments do things kind of in between those gaps, but it's pretty congruent that the majority of us are doing 1 to 2 sessions over a 25-year career in terms of hands-on training for our firefighters. That doesn't mean this is the only thing we can or should be doing. This is just kind of highlighting. So if we think about, you have a fire truck, I'm assuming, in your fire station. How many times have you trained in that truck? Trained how to pump it, pull hose off, all the tool, like we do it. How many times have you put on an SCBA pack, not going to a fire? Probably every time you go in to check your bottle, right? Mm-hmm. We train on these things every single day. What I'm really trying to do here, John, is how can we start thinking about our health in the same manner that we think about firefighting and fire prevention? We're awesome at putting out fires now. We don't burn down in entire cities like we used to. We literally used to burn down cities, huge cities that used to all burn down. We focus on understanding, we focus on awareness, we focus on education, we focus on prevention. And what happens? We stop burning those cities down. What if we took a similar approach to mental health? So it's challenging because there's like so much negative connotation around that word mental health. When I was a kid in the 80s, the mindset was, look at like Ace Ventura, that movie came out in the 90s. They still went to a mental institution, right? A mental health institution. Right. Like this still lives within our view of what this means. We're becoming a lot more accepting and aware, right? So this narrative 100% is changing. It is shifting, which is quite beautiful. But we got a long way to go, like how do we just be like, when I dove into business, I said, okay, I want to build a great business. That should be fun. How do I do that? And all the books that I read, all the things that I listened to had not that much to do with business and everything to do with me improving and changing something about who I was, how I felt, how I acted, how I reacted in the world. And it kind of blew me away. I was like, oh, this isn't about the business. This is about me. And how can I become someone who I'm not in order to achieve the things I want out of life?
Which is crazy to think about, which I can absolutely underscore. I've being a firefighter with no background in business and basically no college degree, trying to get into it, it can confirm. So the role of departments training, like formal training, like you had said, one of my friends and amazing contributor in the space of mental health for firefighters, Battalion Chief Dina Ali from Raleigh. She said something that I always remember, and she's like, in a perfect world, you wouldn't even need a peer support team because everyone in your firehouse would function as that. And they are your peer support team. You wouldn't have to go outside the firehouse to try to contact other members to come in and recognize the need for somebody to get help and do all this stuff. Because everyone is trained up at the individual level to where they could do it. And that and is so important, the individual is willing to talk to those people, understanding what the role of their peer support is. And so I think it's awesome when we have it at the individual level. But I do know that the organization has to completely buy into and perform formal training to let the members know this is something we're taking seriously. People have to feel supported. So kind of where do you come into play with that, as far as like the individual level and the administrative level?
Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful sentiment that that she said, and I completely agree with it. Right? Like this is like, I think this is where we're going. Whether it takes 10, 20, 30 years to get there, who knows? Trust is one of the major challenges, or a lack of trust is one of the major challenges in mental health that we came across in our study. Right? So our approach to this, there's three
Sorry,
elements.
when you say lack of trust, what do you
So
mean
it's
by
deep.
that?
There's a lot of different things. There's still a them versus us attitude in terms of administration and firefighters, right? You add in council, you add in layers of government, you add in unions. There's a lot of this that happens in a lot of places. We're all moving towards the same goals and the same targets. However, we fight along the way, and we want to be the ones, whether it's admin, whether it's unions who have got the win for our team. So this doesn't happen in every department, but in a lot of departments, there's a lot of battling that happens. And so there's trust that becomes misplaced. There's a lack of trust in administration that they actually care for us. We see this sometimes in policy and procedure. Let's go back 3 years to COVID. I would come in after being off shift, and it was not uncommon after a 7-day stretch off to have 20 or 30 new policies sitting on the kitchen table. Most of them conforming to a uniform, not the human who sits behind the uniform. This is one of the reasons why our report is called Heroes Are Also Human. We wear this identity as a firefighter. It looks like a very specific uniform, and the public and firefighters carry this idea and expectation of what that should mean. You said it earlier. And we are also human beings. We go to someone's house who's just lost a child. That's a horrible thing for that family. And you are a part of that experience as a firefighter. I don't know how that doesn't mess with you, any human being. It's a messed up thing. There's an expectation. Well, thanks for coming. Did your job. You guys are the heroes. Move on. We don't necessarily think in that manner. And so trust comes from so many different levels and perspectives. So one of them is like there's a lack of educated practitioners. We also don't trust enough on a big scale to go and talk to a practitioner because we don't even know how to articulate these thoughts, feelings, and emotions within ourselves. So we need to find those trust pieces within ourselves in order to go and talk to the practitioner. So it runs really, really deep. And so trust becomes an important tool within a fire department, not just saying, oh yeah, we have really good trust with it. We have an open door policy. Well, do you actually? We've seen reports, cultural reviews from departments that found that ranking symbols were causing intimidation in firefighters, preventing them from speaking up and asking their superior officers for help. This is just a little example, right? So I know I'm not answering your question directly right now, but trust becomes a major factor within how do we trust in ourselves so that we can trust enough in somebody else, doesn't even matter who that person is, that we can start sharing our story, that we can start moving forward. If we don't trust in those who are leading the charge, we're not going to go to them for help or support that we need. It's simple. What's really fascinating as a firefighter is I spoke with over 100 chiefs and leaders. I never sat in a chief position, so this was kind of a new space for me. They all care. They all are trying to move the ball forward. And I think when we talk about mental health, specifically within the fire service, there needs to be an understanding on all fronts that we are not mental health professionals.
Right.
We share this uncommon commonality of being a firefighter, of going to very unique events and experiences together. And so we have this very tight-knit bond, and it's understandable that we don't want to place that on somebody else, right? Especially with the trauma that we experience. But we need to trust enough in ourselves that we can move through that and that we can be okay, and that it does, not maybe, it 100% plays a role in our life, one way or another. And so if it gets to a point where it drags us down, we don't think we're down and out most of the time. We don't think we're going to be that person. We don't think we're going to be the one going off on a PTSD leave. We all think that we can handle it. But then you go to a call that's new, because they're all different, and something about it triggers you. And it's like, oh my God, what's happening? So if we can put ourselves in a place of trusting ourselves, knowing that these things are going to happen, then I believe we can move through those experiences in a different capacity. So you mentioned this this friend of yours stating that in an ideal world, we don't even need a peer support team. There's an individual called Dr. Brenmer. I think he's out of Maine. Excuse me, the university escapes my mind in this moment. He's a lead researcher in PTSD, written over 400 articles and papers. And some of the work that they are showing is that they don't think peer support's doing anything. They don't think it carries a negative impact. There's nothing negative about it, but they don't see any benefit that it carries in terms of assisting firefighters who have PTSD. So it was interesting hearing this from someone who is so invested in research around the area of PTSD. We are also seeing departments that are, I wouldn't say necessarily moving away from peer support, but they're definitely trying to look for different models than what they were using, because what they are seeing is vicarious trauma. So what happens in peer support? We may have a team of 20, 30, 40 peer support workers. And don't get me wrong, everyone's hearts are in the right place. I am a supporter of peer support. I'm just giving you the information that we found in our research. So what happens is that maybe I don't go and talk to you because I know you, right? I don't want to share my deepest, darkest secrets with you. I don't want to admit to you that something is bothering me. But if my peers, if my crew members, oh, I went and talked to Sarah, she's amazing, go talk to Sarah. Well, guess what? Everybody goes and talks to Sarah.
Everyone talks to Sarah.
And now everyone's only talking to Sarah. And now Sarah's got to deal with everyone else's shit. And Sarah typically isn't a trained therapist. She has very minimal training on how to deal with this stuff. And as a firefighter, someone who is typically, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but lacking trust in practitioners, I might trust a brother or sister to open up and share more. But now I'm dumping that on somebody else. I shouldn't say dumping, but I'm not trying to be negative here, but we put that on someone else's shoulders, and now they have to come back and be like, oh, wow, like, I don't even know how to process that. That went way deeper than I thought it was going to. So we are now seeing in certain places peer support workers who are going off on leaves of absence, on PTSD leaves, on critical incident stress leaves due to vicarious trauma. And so it's a very it's a fine line. It's like, how do we use it as a guide to help sweep us from one place to the next and a bridge, not with the assumption that this should be the sole place that we're going to, right? So again, how we trust. We know we trust each other. So this is where Fire to Light slides in. As a firefighter, I can sit here and say, like, my first course of action was not to go to a therapist. It was to do things that I was comfortable with. For me, that was breath work with a practitioner. It was neurolinguistic programming with a friend that I know who trains other practitioners in neurolinguistic programming. I did a psilocybin ceremony a few months later, which was a massive thing for me. Huge. I'm not saying that's the avenue for everybody. And through that course, I started to gain enough confidence to finally go and start talking to a therapist as well. And so all the things kind of worked. But what I needed through that process was I had brothers and sisters that I could talk to openly, sharing my story, that helped encourage me and inspire me to take next steps. So Fire to Light exists to say, hey, we're here doing this. You can do this too. We understand what it's like to wear the boots, to go to the calls, to smell the smells, to feel the feels, to see the things. We've done it. And we can get to a place where we may be better than we were even before. And we can take these steps to heal so that we don't have to be worse. Because no one wants to be on a PTSD leave. No one wants to be away from work. Most firefighters love their job. So how can we stay there in a safe, healthy, happy manner? And so Fire to Light is here to help prepare for those things, to say, hey, let's start doing the work before a crisis erupts so that if it does, when it does, we're better prepared for it. So we meet the firefighter in an individual space. This happens in an online platform through an online certified mental fitness program that's been approved by psychologists from one firefighter to another. The whole idea is, how can we become more curious about who we are so that if something happens, we can start to ask for help and practice certain modalities before it's too late. And we can start to get ourselves in the mind frame of enhancing our performance at work. This is what we're about, right? We see all this stuff on social media, all these fit firefighters. How do you prepare physically for firefighting? Yeah, amazing. Go and do that. And start doing some breath work, because you need to do breath work when you put your bunker gear on, when you're inside a building, when you're trapped in a building, to conserve your air. You can also use this modality on the way back from a traumatic call to regulate your nervous system, to help you sleep. Breathwork helped me overcome insomnia so that I could actually go to sleep at night. And so as we start to create synapses between the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical, the totality of who we are as human beings, this isn't rocket science. It's actual, this is life. This is who we are. We embody all of these things, all these characteristics, all of these emotions. Let's start connecting them. They're not separate. They are so interconnected, and we treat these things differently. And so we try to bring all that together. We have separate programming for administration staff. So how can we help firefighters? How can we help staff? One thing we learned was only 2% of the departments that we interviewed have dedicated mental health training for administration staff. I believe that this is a problem. When we talk about trust, this potentially could speak to do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
With the assumption that I'm out of the truck, right? So I don't deal with trauma anymore. And you're right. However, I would wager potentially that chiefs might be a little more stressed than the average firefighter. There's a lot of pressure, weight, responsibility, personnel that administrative staff have to deal with. It's just in a different capacity. Now, they might not be more stressed, but they're stressed in different places. And so it looks differently. And, there's a common excuse, I think. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you get it. There is never enough time in the day. I get it. As a firefighter, we might have a lot of time in the day, depending on how busy or not your station is. And, administrative staff are typically probably a lot more busy doing a lot of different things, having to handle a lot of different areas. 2024 is the inaugural year that the International Association of Fire Chiefs is initiating a peer support program. So this is a wonderful initiative. And we've had this in the IAFF for 30 plus years. Really? We're just waking up to this now? This speaks to the levels of trust within the fire service and how we understand and accept mental health. So we're accepting it more. We are aware of it now. And these are part of the how-to tools, the operational side of how we shift in and move into that. So we're really trying to help connect the dots internally on an individual level to get us thinking differently about who we are. And I think as a human, one of the best things we can do is consistently become curious about ourselves, right? I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be. One of my aims is to always be learning something new in my life. And, as a parent, one of the things I learned is that I'm a hypocrite. right? There's a lot of things I said I was going to do that I went back. My kids are never going to watch screens. Just take this thing. It's going to make my life a hell of a lot easier right now, right?
Yeah.
And there's beauty in that, and there's power in that. And so, how are we always humbling ourselves? Be like, okay, learned a few lessons there. Brush it off. I can still stand up. I can still walk forward. I can admit when I'm wrong. How can we constantly be admitting when we're wrong because we're learning something new and it's teaching us to move forward? I think this service at large can really benefit from things like that. And so this is part of the hope of the Fire to Light program. So we touch on firefighters. We have this opportunity to come in, whether it's in person or over Zoom, to do coaching with administrative staff. We dive into various areas of mental fitness and how do we prepare psychologically for our job. So one of the other pieces that is fundamental to what we do is storytelling. And what I mean by that is, I spoke at FRI, at FDIC. I'm going to be speaking at FRI as well. So Fire Rescue International. This is the IAFC major conference of the year. This happens in Dallas in August. So for me, it's like getting on stage, sharing our research, sharing pieces of my story. What we noticed was that fire departments who are seeing the greatest improvement in the mental health of their firefighters, all of them have leaders who openly share their stories of vulnerabilities, who are still going into the fire station, having a coffee, having lunch, having dinner with the crews, but they're open to sharing their experiences, PTSD, firefighter suicide, whatever that might be. This works because storytelling is contagious. Yeah. You share a piece of your story, I share a piece of mine. It took me a long time to get comfortable sharing with people that I swore, grabbed, and pushed my 4-year-old son. That is not something that I am proud of. And it happened. It happened. I can't go back and take that away now. And it happened because there was a lot of stressors in my life from a lot of different angles. I've had to accept that for myself, which was a very challenging thing to do. I've had to, not just apologize to my son, I've had to forgive myself for doing that and to be able to move through that. And there's a lot of work that it took to do that. I'm not perfect, by any stretch of the imagination. And I do believe there's a lot of power in sharing that story. I like listening to podcasts. I like watching speakers on stage, and it isn't when they share their accolades that you're like, oh, wow, that's cool. You have all these championship rings or trophies or numbers before, behind your name, or letters, whatever it might be. Those things are impressive, but it's when they really open their hearts and they share those pieces of themselves that you're like, oh, wow, maybe you're more like me than I thought. You're not some magical superstar of a human being. Maybe you are that as well. But how do we connect with each other? And so, if we like when we think actually about what we do, like look at 9/11, look at a burning building. We follow each other into these terrifying places that most people would never even venture to go into. What if we were just shown how to travel in to, those challenging, those darker sides of our minds and our emotions? What if we were shown how to do that? How could that potentially change the culture and the health of the fire service, of any emergency response, of any person?
Yeah, and there's so much in there that I want to just touch on as we wrap up. One of the things I would be remiss if I don't mention is like, I speak for a lot of people in the fire service. I think when I say it's very easy to talk about accomplishments. Everybody wants to be the go-to guy or girl. Everybody wants to be the badass. Everybody wants to be the most knowledgeable person. It's very difficult to share failure or mistakes. Yeah. And that's, in my opinion, what makes the best mentors, the best instructors, the most trustworthy people, is because in an environment where everybody wants that top tier status, if you're willing to accept that you can say these things, one, because you're not afraid to admit it at the risk of you seeming like you are not the top tier person, which isn't true, but at that risk. And then two, it shows so much confidence in saying like, look, I'm good enough at what I do to know that I can share my mistakes because I'm always trying to get better. Um, I'm not a father, but I can say very confidently, uh, your son is gonna remember the way that you took this as a learning experience and treated him after and apologized, and that sets the example. And I think, when I listen to people talk about parenting and the fire service, there's so much leadership in both. And, the lessons that come from it are just the way people set the example. And I think you set the example. And
Thank
so
you.
I commend you for that. And also, like, just putting it out there for other people, because like we spoke off camera, people need to hear what others went through so that they know they're not by themselves. And it's
Yeah.
refreshing. I mean, like, everybody's got to understand that these things happen, and it's human, and it makes it more approachable. Like, you can look at it and say, I can go and ask for help, I can talk to people. It's not this big crazy thing like I'm the only person to ever have to deal with this. Like, you
Right.
think you're the first guy to have this happen. When they hear that, they're like, I went through this exact same thing with my family. I went through this exact same thing with my decision
Totally.
making, or what, it's so just so much props in that. And I love everything you're doing. We need to do what we can to help promote this, and to make it a more understood group of skill set, and that
Mm.
everyone can use. So thank you so much, and for coming on. I'll give you the floor, and if there's anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up, yeah, please do so.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, man. Thanks for your words. Thanks for having me here to share this. We're just trying to get the research, the information out to the world to try and potentially help as many people as we can. And so you can find us at firetolight.org. That's our website. You can find us at firetolight_firefighters on Instagram. That's one of the platforms that we use primarily in terms of social media. My email address is brandon@firetolight.org. That is literally my personal email. So if anyone listening, whatever, you have any questions, concerns, you just want to chat, you were excited about something that popped up, just reach out. You can learn more about the research, learn more about the programs, and what we can do. Yeah, there you go. We're active in creating community around this space of health, and finding aligned partners like yourself, to help just drive this mission forward. We're here to help. We know what it's like. We know what it's like to struggle. And we know what it's like when days are awesome and moving forward, and to put one step or one foot in front of the other day by day. Life can be quite beautiful, regardless of where we're at. And so, yeah, thanks for being here. We're happy to help, happy to share, happy to do the research, happy to put it out there. And yeah, we're really excited for the future of the fire service. Things may get a little bit rougher before they seem on the outside to get better, but we got to move through some stuff. And I think that we are moving through it. And there's a lot of incredible firefighters, incredible leaders out there who are really moving the needle forward. So I'm super excited for what the next 10 to 20 years of the fire service has in store for us.
Me too. And the mission that you take on is very important, and we'll be doing more of these, I'm sure. So, guys, go give Brandon and Fire to Light a follow. Please visit his website. You can actually get that research paper. You just put in your email there. He's very kind and says he's not going to spam you or send you stuff you don't want to see. So that's cool too. Um, and if you have any questions, please reach out to him. He's very forward, and really quick to respond to me, and I'm sure he'll be the same with you. So please give Brandon and Firelight a follow. Guys, thank you for listening to the Rescue One podcast. As always, take care of each other and be safe out there.